It started with a single sentence. A single sentence that stopped the British press in their tracks, froze social media mid-scroll, and sent royal commentators scrambling for confirmation. A sentence delivered only 3 minutes earlier. Meghan's titles are under immediate review and may be removed. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But before we dive into the shockwaves that sentence unleashed, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt the air change in a room before anyone speaks? That heavy, unmistakable drop in temperature that tells you something significant, something irreversible, is about to happen? That's exactly what insiders say happened inside Kensington Palace today. One moment it was quiet, calm, routine. The next moment, William and Kate walked into a private briefing room with faces that told a story nobody could yet decipher. A story that would reshape the monarchy's future and ignite the most devastating royal crisis since the abdication of Edward VIII. And now here we are. You're about to hear everything. The timing, the motives, the behind-the-scenes tension, the simmering resentments reaching a boiling point, and the moment William allegedly said, "We can't continue like this." Not anymore. But let's slow down for a moment. Because the truth is, this announcement didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't fueled by media pressure or public backlash or a fight behind palace walls. It was something else entirely. Something deeper. Something older. Something nobody outside the highest levels of the monarchy has ever been told before. And today, Prince William and Princess Kate decided the world couldn't be kept in the dark anymore. Let me take you to the beginning. It was early afternoon when the royal motorcade moved through the gates of Kensington Palace. At first, staff assumed it was simply another day of meetings, perhaps a briefing on the Wales Foundation, or an update on Kate's recent initiatives, or the continuation of the quiet but firm modernization of the monarchy she and William have been championing. But then came the whispers. Something happened. Something urgent. Something unexpected. Advisors were called in early. Phones were silenced. Security tightened. Even senior staff, the ones normally in the loop, were asked to wait outside. And when William and Kate finally emerged, insiders say their expressions carried the weight of a decision that wasn't just administrative, but deeply personal. But here's the real question. Why now? Why, after years of tension with Harry and Meghan, did the future king and queen choose this moment? This exact moment. To make an announcement that could divide the monarchy, inflame public debate, and alter the Sussexes' status forever? What changed? The world didn't know yet. But behind those stone walls, the truth was brewing like a storm. From the moment Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties, the monarchy had been on a collision course. There were interviews, accusations, Netflix docuseries, a memoir that ripped through royal history like a blade. There were allegations of racism, betrayal, manipulation, emotional strain, and a family pushed past its breaking point. But even with all of that, the palace never moved to remove Meghan's titles. It would have been too drastic, too symbolic, too final. But something happened in recent days. Something that forced William and Kate to reevaluate every boundary, every protocol, every ounce of leniency that had been extended over the years. You're probably wondering, was it a scandal? A leak? A confrontation? A broken promise? A new revelation inside the monarchy? What could possibly push William, the steady one, the diplomatic one, the cautious one, to take the most aggressive step the royal family has taken against a family member in modern history? In a moment, we're going to get to that. But first, let's talk about why this matters. Because make no mistake, this isn't just about titles. Titles are symbolic. Titles are historic. Titles are power. But in Meghan's case, they're more than that. They're a bridge, a fragile, delicate bridge, between her life in America and the institution she once married into. Removing them wouldn't simply strip her of royal privilege. It would sever her last formal tie to the monarchy she has been both praised and criticized for challenging. And the implications are massive. For public opinion, for royal protocol, for Harry's own identity, for their children's place in royal history, for the monarchy's reputation across the world. This isn't a PR move. It's a constitutional moment. Now, imagine being Harry during all this. Imagine waking up to the news that your brother, the brother you once described as your best friend, the man you confided in, laughed with, fought beside, has endorsed a process that could permanently reshape your wife's royal identity. Imagine being Meghan, seeing her titles debated publicly, hearing advisors discuss her future, listening to commentators speculate whether she deserves to remain Duchess of Sussex at all. The emotional tsunami behind the scenes must be overwhelming. But again, why did William and Kate choose right now to act? Insiders say the answer lies in a specific incident that unfolded just days ago. One that triggered an emergency meeting, one that stunned even seasoned royal advisors, and one that made Kate reportedly say, "We can't let this continue." Not after what we just learned. But what did they learn? Let's explore the atmosphere leading up to the announcement, because context is everything. Royal insiders describe weeks of growing tension, not loud, dramatic tension, but a quiet, simmering kind. The kind that creeps into conversations, sharpens glances, hardens tones. William was increasingly concerned about the monarchy's stability. Kate was deeply unsettled by recent developments. And King Charles, already navigating his own pressures, was deeply conflicted. Even Princess Anne, the no-nonsense pillar of discipline, was pulled into the conversation. And here's the fascinating part. For once, everyone in the monarchy seemed aligned. Something had crossed a line. Something had gone too far. Something demanded a response. Social media noticed subtle signals weeks ago: William's firmer tone during engagements, Kate's unusual seriousness, the couple's guarded expressions when asked about future roles and relationships. But no one realized how deep the ripple effect had gone. Until today. Because today wasn't just a statement. It was the beginning of a process. One that involves the Crown Office, constitutional advisors, legal historians, the Privy Council, and a review board that has only been activated a handful of times in the past century. This is not symbolic. This is structural. This is institutional. And what fuels the drama even more is that Meghan, in recent months, has taken steps that drew heavy scrutiny, steps the palace watched very carefully. Every speech, every appearance, every comment about the monarchy, every business partnership, every indirect reference to royal life. You might be wondering, hasn't she been outspoken before? Hasn't she taken risks before? Hasn't she publicly challenged the monarchy before? Yes, but this time, it's different. Because this time, the monarchy believes her actions intersect with constitutional boundaries, political sensitivities, and international implications, 3 areas the palace guards with ferocity. And when those lines blur, the royal family reacts. William's internal circle has described him as the protector of the crown. Kate is described as the stabilizer of the crown. Together, they represent the monarchy's future. So when both of them sign off on something this serious, you know the situation isn't just brewing, it's boiling. As we move into the main chapters, we will uncover what exact moment triggered the review, the internal alliances forming behind closed doors, Harry's panicked reaction, Kate's emotional involvement, the secret documents William was shown, the unexpected witness who changed everything, and the Queen's forgotten protocol that turned this review into a constitutional earthquake. But we're not there yet. Because before all of that, there's something crucial you need to understand. This decision wasn't unanimous. It wasn't clean. It wasn't without emotional turmoil. Some royals objected. Some urged caution. Some feared the public backlash. But the final decision wasn't influenced by fear. It was influenced by the truth of what the palace uncovered days ago. And that brings us to the most important part of this introduction. The review of Meghan's titles isn't punishment. It isn't revenge. It isn't about public perception or media narratives or past interviews. It's about something the monarchy believes could affect their future stability. And trust me when I say, once you hear what triggered this, the entire royal conflict will look completely different. But before we move into the first chapter, I want you to imagine this scene, because it will frame everything that comes next. Picture William standing at a high window in Kensington Palace, hands clasped behind his back, speaking quietly to Kate. His voice low, his expression heavy, his silence long. Then he turns and says, "It's time." And Kate nods, not with triumph, not with satisfaction, but with sadness. Because she knows what this decision means. For Meghan, for Harry, for the monarchy, for the public, for the future. And with that single nod, the review was set in motion. It wasn't the words that shook the palace to its core. It was the silence that followed them. A silence so heavy, so still, that even the rustle of papers seemed disrespectful. A silence that said one thing: this moment would be remembered. Let's start at the exact second it happened. Prince William walked into the briefing room with a folded sheet of paper in his hand. Unremarkable, plain, almost mundane. The kind of paper anyone could mistake for a schedule or a notes list. But the way he held it said otherwise. His fingers were tight around the edges. His jaw was set. His eyes were unmoving, focused, and colder than anyone in the room had seen in years. Behind him, Kate followed, not hurried, not flustered, but with the steady composure of someone who had accepted the weight of what was about to unfold. Every advisor stopped breathing. Every aide straightened their posture. Every private secretary lowered their gaze. You could almost hear the unspoken question humming through the room. Is this really happening? William didn't waste time. He placed the paper on the table, smoothed the top edge with a slow, deliberate swipe of his hand, and then said the words that would rewrite the Sussex chapter of royal history. Effective immediately, the Duchess of Sussex's titles are under formal review. And then came the part that felt like a seismic shift. The possibility of removal is on the table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture. He didn't emphasize the last line. He simply said it, and the room erupted in tension. But before we go deeper into that explosive moment, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where the truth wasn't spoken, yet everyone instinctively knew what it meant? That's what this was. This wasn't an announcement. This was a declaration of boundaries, a declaration of fatigue, a declaration of resolve. Because William didn't simply say the words, he meant them. Advisors later described the room as electrically charged, more intense than during Harry and Meghan's 2020 exit negotiations, and one even said, it felt like the monarchy was finally drawing a line in the sand. So what exactly happened inside that room in the seconds, minutes, and hours after William made the announcement? Let's break it down, moment by moment. Because the details reveal a story far more dramatic and far more emotional than the headlines will ever capture. The first person to react wasn't Kate. It wasn't an advisor. It wasn't the private secretary. It was William himself. After delivering the statement, he didn't sit down. He stayed standing, one hand resting on the table as if grounding himself, steadying himself, preparing himself for what came next. Because William knew something no one else in the room did. Once he said those words, there was no turning back. And Kate, her reaction was subtle, but telling. Kate doesn't reveal emotion publicly, not the kind that gives away internal conflict. But those present say she swallowed hard, then drew in a slow breath she held longer than usual. A sign she had prepared herself mentally, emotionally, and privately for this outcome. One aide described her expression with 3 words. Sad, firm, necessary. But let's take a step back. Why did William deliver the announcement instead of King Charles? That's unusual, isn't it? In the hierarchy of royal authority, the reigning monarch traditionally handles matters concerning titles, royal status, and constitutional shifts. So why William? Because the message wasn't just administrative. It was emotional. It was generational. It was about the future, not the past. Charles, dealing with health, public pressure, and internal strain, stood back and allowed the heir to the throne to take charge. And that in itself speaks volumes. You don't let the future king lead such a monumental moment unless the issue affects the monarchy's trajectory. And it does. Now, let's zoom out for a second. Outside, London was its usual restless self. Taxis honking, crowds bustling, tourists snapping photos of historic statues without realizing one was about to be carved in real time inside a palace office. Inside, however, everything froze. One advisor finally broke the silence by asking the one question nobody wanted to say aloud. What triggered this? William didn't answer immediately. He sat down, clasped his hands, leaned forward slightly, and said, "We've been silent long enough." Just 6 words. But those 6 words cracked open the entire meaning behind the announcement. Because this wasn't sudden. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional revenge. This was accumulated. Years of tension. Years of public battles. Years of watching the monarchy's reputation get tossed around like a political football. Years of seeing the institution, one built on stability, be dragged into controversy. But William didn't say Harry and Meghan. He said, "We've been silent long enough." That distinction matters. Because the moment he said it, Kate glanced at him, just briefly, but enough to show she knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't just about Meghan. It wasn't just about titles. It was about something far more serious, far more delicate, and far more dangerous to the monarchy's long-term survival. Let's break down the psychological undertone behind that statement. When William said, "We've been silent," it wasn't a complaint about media narratives. It was an accusation aimed inward, toward the institution itself. Silence had allowed misunderstandings to grow. Silence had allowed resentment to build. Silence had allowed external forces to hijack royal narratives. Silence had allowed Meghan and Harry to define the story. And now, silence was being replaced with action. This is why the announcement hit so hard. Because for the first time since Meghan entered the royal sphere, the monarchy wasn't responding. They were initiating. Now let's look at Kate. Why was she standing beside William during an announcement that technically didn't require her presence? Kate's presence was intentional, symbolic, strategic, deeply personal. She wasn't there as William's wife. She wasn't there as the Princess of Wales. She wasn't even there as the future queen. She was there as the quiet bridge between the monarchy's past, present, and future. When Kate stands beside William, she sends a message without saying a word. This is unified. This is deliberate. This is non-negotiable. And trust me, Meghan and Harry knew exactly what that meant when they heard her name mentioned in the announcement. Now, let's go deeper. After the announcement was delivered, the room erupted into a series of questions. Advisors scrambled to understand the timing. Legal secretaries began taking furious notes. Communications officials exchanged uneasy looks. Everyone understood the gravity. One aide asked whether they should anticipate a public response from Harry and Meghan. Kate answered first. Yes. One word, but powerful. She knew Meghan. She knew the dynamic. She knew the playbook. She knew this would ignite a reaction. Another advisor hesitated before asking William, "What is the primary reason for invoking a title review?" William looked at Kate. Kate looked at William. Then William said, "The integrity of the crown." That answer shut down every further question. Because when decisions are made for the crown, not for optics, not for emotion, not for politics, they are irreversible. But here's the question that you probably want answered right now. What exactly endangered the integrity of the crown? Was it Meghan's public actions? Was it something in her personal projects? Was it a confrontation behind closed doors? Was it a breach of protocol? A private disagreement? A new revelation? Or something else entirely? We'll get there. Because the trigger event is so shocking, so unexpected, so strategically buried beneath layers of silence, that when I tell you what it was, the entire landscape of this conflict will shift in your mind. But before we reach that twist, there's something important you need to understand. The announcement William delivered today wasn't just a statement. It was a signal to the public, a signal to the monarchy, a signal to Meghan and Harry, a signal to history, a signal that said, "This family is done playing defense." Let's talk about the immediate ripple effects inside the palace. Within minutes, the corridors buzzed with whispers. Staff exchanged hurried glances. Phones lit up with urgent messages. Aides rushed to coordinate briefing materials in case the public demanded clarity. But here's the interesting part. No one questioned the decision's necessity. Not one. Why? Because everyone knew something had been simmering. Something big, something loud, something unavoidable. The palace had reached its tipping point. Someone close to the Wales household said something chilling. This is the announcement they wanted to avoid for as long as possible. The fact that it happened means something irreversible occurred. Irreversible. Think about that. Not inconvenient. Not upsetting. Not frustrating. Irreversible. What happened that could possibly fit that description? Let's shift briefly to the outside world. While the palace scrambled, journalists sat up straighter. Phones started ringing. Producers shouted across newsrooms. Social media trended within minutes. 3 minutes. That was the time frame between the official palace briefing and the global media explosion. 3 minutes. That's why the world saw headlines like, "Kensington Palace confirms title review. Royal earthquake. Meghan's titles under threat. Prince William issues devastating announcement." And the one that dominated every platform. Immediate review. Possible removal. People were stunned. Some celebrated. Some were furious. Some were confused. But everyone was paying attention. And that's exactly what William and Kate anticipated. The world needed to see this moment. The monarchy needed to reclaim the narrative. But the most dramatic reaction of all, Harry's. Because while the palace was engulfed in controlled chaos, Harry was thousands of miles away, blindsided. And his first reaction? Shock, panic, silence, anger, confusion. He didn't know this was coming. He wasn't warned. He wasn't consulted. He wasn't given a courtesy call. And that, in itself, is telling. The monarchy didn't see him as part of the decision-making circle anymore. That realization, insiders say, hit him like a punch to the chest. Now let's circle back to the moment after William delivered the announcement. Kate placed her hand on the table, just briefly, like a grounding gesture, and said something that stunned even the advisors. We need to prepare for the next step. Next step? What next step? What could possibly come after a title review? Only a handful of people in that room knew the answer. And now you will too. What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about the royal tension was only the surface? What if the real catalyst, the true spark that ignited Prince William's devastating announcement, was something far more targeted, far more personal, and far more alarming than anything we've seen in the past 4 years? Because here's the truth. The review of Meghan's titles didn't come from a single incident. It came from a pattern. A pattern that the monarchy quietly tracked, observed, and documented. And eventually, the pattern became a problem. The kind of problem the crown cannot ignore. Let's go to the moment where everything shifted. It began with an unexpected phone call. Not from a royal, not from a politician, not from a journalist, but from an official, someone whose role intersects with international diplomacy and constitutional boundaries. Someone who said something that made William reportedly tighten his grip on the phone and say only 2 words. Not again. What does that mean? Not again. What had happened before? What had been repeating? Let's peel back the layers, because this chapter exposes the foundation of the entire crisis. Think back over the past year. Meghan had been building her public presence aggressively. New projects, new partnerships, new media ventures, new speeches about her identity, experiences, and challenges. Nothing inherently wrong with that. She is allowed to build her own life, her own career. But it wasn't the content that troubled the monarchy. It was the overlap. The way Meghan's public actions increasingly intersected with royal identity, royal prestige, royal symbolism, royal authority. And the monarchy felt she was crossing boundaries she didn't realize were boundaries. Or maybe, boundaries she no longer cared existed. Let me give you an example. A few months ago, Meghan made a statement in an interview, a seemingly harmless line at first glance. Something about how she still carries her title with purpose, and how people look to her as a figure of change. Harmless, right? Except to the monarchy, it wasn't harmless at all. Because the moment a titled royal connects their title with activism, influence, political movements, or international negotiations, it becomes a constitutional issue. That's the part many people don't understand. Titles aren't ornamental. They're legal. They're historic. They're recognized by governments, not just fans. They come with weight, and responsibility, and limitations. So when Meghan began positioning herself as a global figure with the authority of the Duchess of Sussex, alarms began to ring. This isn't about silencing her voice. This isn't about controlling her career. This isn't about jealousy or rivalry. This is about the collision between personal branding and royal power. And trust me, the monarchy pays attention to collisions. Now, let's talk about the moment things escalated. There was a private event, exclusive, elite, international, where Meghan reportedly made comments that were interpreted as authoritative, representing not just herself, but the title she carries. A diplomat who attended that event later reached out privately to the palace. Their message? Is Meghan speaking on behalf of the crown again? We need clarification. Again. That word again appears everywhere in this story. Because this wasn't the first time. And the palace was growing uneasy. William was briefed immediately. Kate was updated shortly after. Both of them reportedly reacted the same way, by going quiet. And when William goes quiet, insiders say that's when you know something serious has happened. But it doesn't stop there. Around the same time, Meghan had partnered with a major American organization for a project that, without her realizing, positioned her title as part of its international marketing strategy. The palace saw ads and messaging that implied, "The Duchess of Sussex supports. The Duchess of Sussex endorses. The Duchess of Sussex collaborates with." To the average person, this is normal. But to the monarchy, this is the equivalent of mixing water and electricity. Because titles, especially royal ones, cannot be used for commercial endorsements. Not for products. Not for services. Not for political or ideological campaigns. And definitely not for international partnerships. Was Meghan doing this intentionally? Insiders say no, not intentionally. But intention doesn't matter when impact is the issue. And the impact was massive. Foreign officials began asking questions. British constitutional advisors began holding emergency discussions. The palace's legal team began examining precedents. And Kate reportedly said something that stuck in William's mind. "She may not understand the boundaries, but the world thinks she represents us." Think about that. It's not what Meghan meant. It's what the world assumed. That assumption is dangerous for a monarchy that has to remain neutral. Neutral in politics. Neutral in global affairs. Neutral in activism. Neutral in influence. So when Meghan's actions blurred those lines, the monarchy had to respond. But here's where the situation gets even more complicated. Harry has been emotional, divided, and overwhelmed for years. But in recent months, he's reportedly distanced himself from certain internal protocols, meaning he's no longer briefing the palace about Meghan's planned public projects, which means the palace hears about them when everyone else does. And nothing terrifies the monarchy more than being unprepared. So imagine this. You're William, the heir to the throne, tasked with protecting the institution. You're watching projects, interviews, conversations, and partnerships unfold without warning. You're seeing Meghan's title attached to messaging that has consequences across borders. You start receiving calls from diplomats, advisors, media regulators, legal historians, international watchdogs, everyone asking the same thing. Is Meghan authorized to speak like this? That's when the monarchy realized something. If the world sees Meghan as a representative of the crown, then the crown is responsible for Meghan's actions. And that, right there, is the line that cannot be crossed. But that still wasn't the final trigger. No, the final trigger was far more dramatic. It happened when William received a confidential briefing, the same one he referenced in the meeting from Chapter 1. A document that analyzed Meghan's most recent appearance and how it was interpreted internationally. This briefing wasn't emotional. It wasn't political. It wasn't biased. It was factual, and the facts were devastating. According to insiders, the briefing outlined misinterpretations of Meghan's comments, misuse of her title by organizations, misrepresentation of royal authority, international confusion about royal endorsements, political implications tied to her name, economic influence tied to her status, and worst of all, a growing perception that Meghan's activities were unofficially sanctioned by the crown. That's the nightmare scenario. Because once the public or foreign partners believe that a titled royal is speaking in an official capacity, the monarchy loses control of its own voice. At this point, advisors described William as visibly alarmed. Kate was deeply troubled, and the tone inside Kensington Palace shifted dramatically. One aide said, this was the moment they realized silence was no longer sustainable. So, William requested something unprecedented. He asked for a full historical analysis of what happens when a royal title is used in ways that may conflict with constitutional guidelines. That analysis produced something extraordinary, a forgotten protocol from the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. A protocol that said, in circumstances where a title's usage may compromise the neutrality of the crown, a review must be initiated. That protocol had been created for emergencies, rare emergencies, crises of high constitutional sensitivity. Yet here it was, being applied to Meghan. But what made William act immediately was not the protocol itself. It was the final page of the confidential briefing, a page that warned of a specific, imminent situation. One involving Meghan, one involving international implications, one that could affect diplomatic relations, and one that was set to unfold within the next 2 months. When William read that page, insiders say he went pale. Kate closed her eyes, and both of them knew. It was time. The review had to begin. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not after another conversation with the Sussexes. Immediately, the monarchy had run out of time. Now, here's the part you haven't heard yet. The part that ties everything together. The briefing didn't just analyze Meghan's past actions. It warned of something being planned. Something big. Something global. Something the palace knew nothing about. And that, more than anything else, was the final straw. Because if Meghan launched this project under the title Duchess of Sussex, the crown would be dragged into the center of it. And not in a good way. But what exactly was Meghan planning? What was in that briefing? What did William read that made him say not again? Why did Kate reportedly insist? We can't let this continue, not after what we just learned. The specifics of that planned project remain hidden from public view, but insiders hint at a revelation, one that could shake the monarchy's confidence in Meghan forever. It happened at midnight, not in the morning when advisors were awake, not in the afternoon when the palace runs like a machine, not in the evening when the Wales household wraps its duties for the day. Midnight. Because the kind of conversation William and Kate needed to have could only happen when the palace halls were silent, when the corridors were empty, and when no one, not staff, not advisors, not even courtiers, would overhear a single word. That's how you know this was serious. Nothing in royal life happens at midnight unless something has gone terribly wrong. And on this night, something had. Have you ever had that moment when you know something is coming? Something big, something heavy, but you don't know exactly how bad it is yet? That was the air inside Kensington Palace just before the meeting began. Let me paint the scene for you. The palace was dark except for a few dimly lit sconces along the hallway leading to William's private office. The echoes of footsteps weren't their usual confident rhythm. They were slower, heavier, controlled. William walked ahead with a file tucked under his arm, the same one containing the confidential briefing from Chapter 2. Behind him, Kate walked quietly, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. The doors to William's office creaked slightly as he pushed them open, revealing the room inside. A single lamp glowed on the corner of a desk. Files were stacked neatly. A portrait of Queen Elizabeth II rested near the window. The room smelled faintly of old books and polished wood. Kate closed the door behind them. They didn't sit immediately. For nearly half a minute, they said nothing. And that silence, that thick, weighted silence, told both of them that whatever came next would change the course of their family, the monarchy, and their future. William was the first to speak. It's worse than we thought. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't sound angry. He sounded tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of trying to hold everything together. Kate stepped forward slowly. What did they tell you? William set the file down on the desk and opened it. Halfway through flipping the first page, he stopped. Almost as if he didn't want to relive what he'd already read. He handed the file to Kate. Page 6, he whispered. Kate took it with both hands, as if handling something fragile, and began reading. Her expression didn't change at first. Then her eyes narrowed. Then her breath caught. Then she looked up. This can't be true, she said quietly. But William didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because Kate knew from the look in his eyes, this wasn't speculation. This wasn't exaggeration. This wasn't media gossip. This was real. What was on page 6? It wasn't the whole project Meghan was planning. It wasn't the constitutional ramifications. It wasn't even the misuse of the Duchess title. It was something else. A single paragraph. A single statement. A single consequence. One that hinted that Meghan's upcoming project could directly involve a political figure in a way that could be interpreted internationally as a partnership connected to her royal title. To a monarchy that must remain neutral, this is the equivalent of steering into a hurricane. Kate reached the final sentence of the page. Her hand lowered. Her shoulders dropped. She pressed her lips together. And then she said the one thing William had been avoiding all night. This could compromise the crown. William nodded once. A slow, heavy nod. And that's when Kate realized they were past the point of internal worry. Past the point of waiting. Past the point of silence. We need the advisors, she said. They're already on their way. William had called them before Kate even entered the room. Minutes later, the advisors arrived, tired, slightly disheveled, summoned from their homes long after their scheduled hours. But no one complained. No one asked why. That's how you know this wasn't a routine issue. The monarchy doesn't wake people in the middle of the night for something small. 3 advisors entered first: constitutional, diplomatic, communications. 2 more joined minutes later, legal and historical. And finally, a representative from the royal household arrived. When everyone was inside, William stood at the center of the room, not at his desk, not in a chair, but standing, like a man preparing for battle. "We received a briefing today," he began. "Something that concerns the title of the Duchess of Sussex." Every advisor looked up sharply. He continued, "It outlines a series of events and interpretations that place the neutrality of the crown at risk." He didn't say the project's name. He didn't give specific details. He gave only what was necessary. Kate stepped forward. "We've reviewed the implications. If action isn't taken, this could escalate into an international misunderstanding. The crown cannot be connected to this." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't sound emotional. She sounded resolute. Everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably. One advisor cleared his throat. "With all respect, Your Royal Highness, are we discussing the possibility of a formal review?" William faced him directly. "Yes." You could feel the shock ripple across the room. Royal titles don't get reviewed casually. The process is complicated. It is historic. It often involves the Privy Council. In some cases, it requires parliamentary input. But William was done waiting. "Before anything is finalized," another advisor said carefully, "we must examine the precedent. Title reviews are rare. The last one, I know exactly when the last one was," William cut in. "And I know why. This is different. And this is necessary." Kate added softly, "The crown cannot be misinterpreted. Not again." That word "again" echoed through the room like a warning bell. Everyone understood. This wasn't about Meghan's past interviews. This wasn't about the Oprah special. This wasn't about the memoir. This wasn't even about the strained family relationship. This was about something much larger. Now here's where the meeting takes an unexpected turn, because what happened next shocked even the advisors. The legal advisor, normally calm and analytical, spoke in a tense voice none of them had heard before. "There is another issue we must consider," he said. "Something we discovered earlier this evening." He opened his own file, passed copies around the room, and waited. Kate was the first to read it. Her eyes widened. Her breath halted. She turned to the advisor. "Where did this come from?" "It was submitted anonymously," he replied. William stepped forward. "Anonymous?" The advisor nodded. "And verified?" "Yes." This is when the energy in the room shifted, suddenly faster, sharper, more urgent. Because the document wasn't just analysis. It was evidence. Evidence of something Meghan was reportedly preparing that the palace had been unaware of. Evidence that her title, used in specific contexts, could appear to lend royal weight to a project involving political advocacy. Evidence that put the monarchy in direct conflict with its constitutional obligations. "It isn't intentional," one advisor said quickly, trying to soften the blow. "We don't believe she's doing this deliberately." "But she's doing it," another countered. William closed the folder slowly. "This isn't about intention," he said. "This is about impact." That sentence changed the tone of the entire night. Everyone knew what it meant. If the monarchy failed to act, they wouldn't just look weak, they'd look complicit. The communications advisor spoke next. "If this becomes public without a response, the crown could face international misunderstanding. Leaders could interpret her title as official endorsement. That's a constitutional disaster." Kate finally sat down, not out of fatigue, but because she needed a stable foundation to deliver her next words. "We have reached the point where doing nothing is more dangerous than acting." Silence fell across the room again. But this wasn't the stillness of uncertainty. This was the stillness of realization. The monarchy had no choice. The review had to begin. Yet, the emotional cost of that decision weighed heavily, especially on Kate. Because removing a title isn't simply an administrative task. It's a scar. It becomes part of history. It becomes part of the family's story forever. And she knew what this would do to Harry. She knew he would take it personally. She knew he would feel betrayed. She knew he would feel isolated. She knew this would deepen the rift between the brothers in a way that might never heal. But Kate is not impulsive. If she endorsed a title review, it meant the issue was beyond repair. One advisor, worried about the emotional fallout, asked, "Should we inform Harry before this becomes official?" William didn't hesitate. No. That single syllable was cold. Sharp. Final. Kate looked down for a moment, not out of disagreement, but out of sadness. Then she looked back up at William and said quietly, "You're doing the right thing." He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew what he was thinking, that this wasn't justice. This wasn't anger. This wasn't punishment. This was protection. Protection of the monarchy. Protection of future kings. Protection of national stability. Protection of constitutional order. Now let's talk about what happened after the advisors left. Because the final moment of this midnight meeting is the part that no one outside Kensington Palace has ever heard. Once the room emptied, William and Kate sat together, side by side, in the stillness of the dimly lit office. No advisors, no assistants, no protocol, just two people who understood the weight of the crown better than anyone else. Kate finally spoke first. "There's something else you haven't told them," she said. William didn't deny it. He reached into the drawer of his desk and pulled out a smaller file, a brown envelope sealed shut. He handed it to Kate. "Read it," he said softly. She opened it, read the contents, and froze. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Is this confirmed?" William nodded. Kate closed the file slowly, her hands trembling just once. Then she looked at him, eyes wide, breath shallow. "This changes everything," she whispered. And she was right, because what she read in that envelope wasn't just alarming. It was explosive. It was something that would reshape the monarchy's understanding of the entire situation. You may not think about them often. Most people don't. But inside the British monarchy, titles are everything. They are currency, identity, heritage, legitimacy, responsibility, influence, and sometimes danger, especially when the wrong title intersects with the wrong action at the wrong moment. Before we go deeper, let me ask you something. When you hear Duchess of Sussex, what comes to mind? Grace? Royal status? A connection to Prince Harry? A symbolic thread to centuries of tradition? Most people think of glamour, privilege, and history. But behind the scenes, that title is a constitutional instrument, not a decorative accessory. And that is precisely why Meghan Markle's title has become the center of a legal, historic, and symbolic earthquake. The midnight meeting in Chapter 3 ended with Kate reading a confidential envelope containing information that changed everything. But before we reveal what was in that envelope, you must understand a critical truth. Meghan's title is more fragile than the public realizes. In fact, it has always been fragile, from the very day it was granted. Why? Because Meghan, unlike every duchess before her, occupied a position that combined an American background, global celebrity status, modern media influence, political associations, international activism, commercial brand power, all under a title rooted in 1,000 years of royal tradition built to operate under strict neutrality. That combination is combustible. Imagine mixing gasoline with a lit match. The monarchy knows which is which. Let's break this down layer by layer, because the palace didn't reach this point overnight. The review of Meghan's titles is the result of a deeper structural reality, one that began long before her marriage to Harry. Let's start with the legal meaning of her title. When Meghan married Harry, she became Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, a title with 3 components, each with its own legal framework. Component 1, Her Royal Highness. This designation is not symbolic, it is constitutional. It grants status, precedence, and recognition across the Commonwealth. It signals that the person is a working member of the royal family. But Meghan and Harry stepped down from royal duties. They distanced themselves from the monarchy. They rejected the working royal structure. And by leaving the system, they entered a constitutional gray zone. You can't be half in, half out. You can't carry HRH and reject its responsibilities. That's like holding a passport you don't use while still speaking on behalf of the country. That contradiction created tension from the beginning. Component 2, the Duchess of Sussex. Now this is where things get even more complicated. The title Duchess is noble, historic, deeply tied to land, hierarchy, and the crown. But titles don't exist in isolation. They're attached to lineage, territory, legal identity, recognition by the monarch. Sussex itself is symbolic. The territory of Sussex, once ruled by ancient kings, is woven into the fabric of British identity. When Meghan speaks as the Duchess of Sussex, she carries not just a title, but a kingdom's name. She carries territory. She carries history. She carries an entire cultural legacy. This is why the monarchy becomes alarmed when that title is attached to commercial ventures, or political conversations. It isn't about limiting Meghan's speech. It's about separating the crown from activities that shouldn't involve it. Component 3. Princess Henry. Most people don't realize this, but legally, Meghan's title also makes her Princess Henry, because her royal title is tied to Harry's, not her own. Princess titles linked to a husband's name carry unique legal implications. They can be revoked. They can be redefined. They can be altered by the monarch, meaning Meghan's titles are far more vulnerable than Kate's or Camilla's. Now let's move to the historical meaning of Meghan's title. Throughout history, royal titles have been removed for far less than what the monarchy sees happening now. Take the case from 1936. Wallis Simpson, the American woman for whom King Edward VIII abdicated, was denied the HRH style because the monarchy feared she would use it improperly, or that foreign powers might exploit her title to gain influence. Sound familiar? The monarchy fears that Meghan's title is being used, intentionally or unintentionally, to influence international conversations, shape political narratives, and build global branding. This isn't paranoia. This is precedent. Then consider Queen Elizabeth II's reforms. She tightened title protocols, reduced the number of working royals, prepared the monarchy for a modern age, and established policies to prevent title misuse. One of those policies, the Forgotten Protocol, is the very rule William uncovered and cited in Chapter 2. A rule that states, if a title endangers the neutrality of the crown must intervene. That is not optional. That is not flexible. It is constitutional. Which brings us to the symbolic meaning of Meghan's title. This is where the emotional weight hits. Because Meghan's title is not just legal or historical, it's symbolic. When she became Duchess of Sussex, she represented unity, modernization, diversity, a bridge between cultures, hope for a new era, a step toward a more inclusive monarchy. Millions of people saw her as a symbol, a living symbol of the monarchy's evolution. Kate saw it. William saw it. Queen Elizabeth saw it. The world saw it. But symbols can fracture. And when they do, the break is louder than anything else. Over the past 4 years, Meghan's title became a lightning rod. For supporters, it symbolized resilience. For critics, controversy. For the monarchy, confusion. For the public, division. For the media, headlines. For politicians, opportunity. For international observers, power. Too much power. Too much influence. Too much unpredictability. Now let's go back to that midnight meeting, because Kate's reaction matters. When she read the confidential envelope William handed her, she wasn't shocked by the political risk. She wasn't shocked by the diplomatic concerns. She wasn't shocked by the global optics. She was shocked by the symbolism. Because the envelope didn't contain legal documents. It didn't contain political memos. It didn't contain intelligence reports. It contained something personal. It contained a record, a detailed assessment, of how Meghan's title was being perceived by young audiences, global viewers, and grassroots movements. According to insiders, it showed that Meghan's title was being interpreted as a badge of rebellion against the monarchy, that her Duchess identity was becoming a symbol of anti-establishment sentiment, that young voters abroad saw her as a political figure, that activists were referencing her title as a weapon against the monarchy itself, that organizations were using her name as a royal endorsement without permission. And the most alarming part, her title was increasingly being associated with causes that the monarchy cannot, under any circumstance, be linked to. This is what made Kate whisper, "This changes everything." Because it wasn't just constitutional anymore. It wasn't just political. It wasn't just procedural. It was emotional. If Meghan's title was being used as a symbol against the crown, even unintentionally, then the monarchy wasn't just facing a legal conflict. They were facing a symbolic betrayal. Now ask yourself, how does a monarchy survive symbolic betrayal? How does an institution built on perception maintain credibility when its own title becomes ammunition? Kate and William realized they were not just dealing with Meghan's choices. They were dealing with the world's interpretation of those choices. And interpretation shapes legacy. Interpretation shapes history. Interpretation shapes monarchy. That's why William said, "We've been silent long enough." Because silence was no longer neutral. Silence was becoming complicit. This is the point where the palace decided the review couldn't wait. Not because they wanted to punish Meghan, Not because they wanted revenge. Not because they wanted to humiliate her. Not because they wanted to strip her of identity. But because they were losing control of the meaning of her title. And if a title loses meaning, the monarchy loses control. This brings us to the final piece of this chapter, the emotional truth. Because everything so far has been structural, constitutional, historical. But there's another layer. The human one. Kate, according to insiders, struggled the most. She didn't want to hurt Meghan. She didn't want to escalate tensions with Harry. She didn't want to create a permanent fracture. But she also knew something the world often forgets. Monarchies don't survive on gold, jewels, or crowns. They survive on symbolism. And when the symbolism breaks, the institution breaks with it. Kate saw the symbolism breaking. And when she looked at the analysis in the confidential envelope, when she saw how Meghan's title was being used, she knew the monarchy was running out of time. She knew the review had to begin. She knew history was repeating itself. She knew this moment would define William's legacy. And she knew one more thing. Something even William didn't fully grasp yet. This review wasn't just about Meghan. It was about the future queen. Because if Kate becomes queen consort while Meghan holds a title being used against the monarchy, it undermines Kate's own authority. And Kate, quiet, elegant, gentle Kate, cannot and will not allow chaos to shadow her husband's reign. She will protect the crown, and she will protect William. That is why this decision wasn't political. It was personal, deeply personal. And now that the review has begun, there is no going back. But what happened in the next 48 hours was even more shocking. Because after the midnight meeting, after the constitutional discussion, after the historical analysis, and after Kate's emotional revelation, the palace received a second anonymous message. One that revealed something the monarchy had been trying to keep buried for years. Something that forced William into a decision he didn't want to make. Something that shifted the entire direction of the review. And something that shook the royal family to its core. It was the one moment no advisor was prepared for. The one moment the palace never expected. The one moment that revealed the true emotional weight behind the title review. Because long before the official announcement, long before the advisors gathered, long before William unfolded that damning confidential briefing, Kate stepped forward, and the Princess of Wales did something she almost never does. She intervened. Let's begin with a question. Have you ever watched someone who is normally calm, private, composed, and emotionally reserved suddenly reveal the burden they've been carrying for years? It's unsettling. It's powerful. It's unforgettable. And that is exactly what Kate did. But before her intervention makes sense, you need to understand Kate's role inside the monarchy. Not the public role, not the glamorous one, but the private one. Kate is the stabilizer of the crown. She is the unshakable center, the quiet mediator, the emotional anchor behind William's strength. She is the person who sees everything, hears everything, processes everything, and says nothing, unless she has to. And on this night, she had to. Let's rewind to the moment right after the midnight meeting from Chapter 3 ended. Advisors had filed out. The desk lamp still glowed softly. The confidential envelope sat unopened now on a corner of the desk, its weight symbolic. William leaned against the edge of the desk, hands clasped together, eyes staring down at the floor. Not in anger, not in frustration, but in exhaustion. Because he knew that once they moved forward with this review, there would be no reversing it. The consequences would ripple across the public, the monarchy, and most painfully, Harry. Kate watched him for a moment. Not as the Princess of Wales. Not as the future queen. Not as a royal figurehead. She watched him as his wife. As the person who knows him better than anyone else alive. Then, slowly, she walked toward him. William, she said softly. He didn't look up. She stepped closer. William, look at me. He finally lifted his head. And that's when she saw it. Not fear, not regret, but a deep, private pain. Because making decisions as a future king is one thing. Making decisions that hurt someone you once loved, your own brother, is another. And the look on William's face told Kate everything she needed to know. He wasn't just thinking like a king. He was thinking like a brother. That's where Kate stepped in. Because she knew that if William let emotion cloud this moment, the crown would suffer, and the monarchy might never recover. She took a breath, gathered her thoughts, and did something she rarely does. She spoke from emotion instead of restraint. William, you are protecting something larger than us. larger than your brother, larger than this family, and larger than what people think. He stayed silent, waiting. Kate continued. The crown needs clarity. And if Meghan's title is creating confusion, if it's creating risk, then you're doing the right thing. Still, William said nothing. Kate stepped even closer. And if you don't act now, the crown will be forced into a position it may not recover from. This is where her voice changed, where a tremor slipped through her normally steady tone. Because this isn't just about a title anymore. It's about what that title is becoming. She was referring to the symbolic shift outlined in the envelope, the one showing how Meghan's title was morphing into a symbol of rebellion, political identity, and anti-monarchist sentiment. Kate understood the danger better than anyone, not because she feared Meghan, not because she feared criticism, but because she knows how fragile royal symbolism can be. One misinterpreted symbol can topple centuries of tradition. Ask yourself, what does a monarchy stand on? Power? Wealth? Ceremony? No, it stands on story, on meaning, on symbolism. And Meghan's title had begun to hold a meaning that threatened everything the crown represents. Kate knew this. William knew this. The advisors knew this. But saying it out loud was different. Kate took another breath, and this time she spoke with a firmness rarely heard from her. I've watched you carry this burden for years. You've protected everyone, your father, your children, the institution, even Harry. But you're forgetting something important. She paused. You can't protect the monarchy if you're afraid of hurting someone who is no longer protecting it with you. That line struck William like a shock. Because Kate didn't say Meghan. She said someone. She said it without accusation, without anger, without bitterness. She said it with truth. William exhaled slowly. It was the first sign that her words were breaking through the emotional fog surrounding him. Then Kate walked to the desk and picked up the confidential envelope. The same envelope that detailed how Meghan's title was being used symbolically against the crown. She held it in front of William. This isn't about Meghan, she said. This is about the monarchy being dragged into something it didn't choose. She placed the envelope on the desk. And if we don't act, we will lose control of the meaning of the crown. That was the sentence that shifted everything. William finally stood straight. His shoulders squared. His expression sharpened. This was no longer a brother conflicted between loyalty and duty. This was a future king awakening to his responsibility. Kate wasn't done. Because what she said next is what advisors later described as the turning point. You are not punishing her, Kate said. You are protecting us. William stared at her. Kate continued. And you're protecting them too. Them. Who was she referring to? The children. George. Charlotte. Louis. Kate wasn't thinking about the past. She was thinking about the future. Because if Meghan's title continued to carry unpredictable symbolic meaning, then the monarchy that George will one day inherit could become unstable before he ever sits on the throne. And Kate, the mother before the princess, was not going to let that happen. You're protecting our children, she repeated. Their future, their legacy, their place in history. William's jaw tightened. Something shifted in his eyes, something cold, focused, resolute. Kate saw it immediately. You understand now, she whispered. And he did. Let's pause for a moment. Many people imagine royal decisions happening like political debates, cold, strategic, emotionless. But in reality, the decisions that shape the monarchy are often deeply human. They're shaped by fear, by hope, by responsibility, by love, by pressure, by legacy. This moment between William and Kate was all of those things at once. Because Kate's intervention wasn't just emotional support. It was a reminder of the truth William feared to face.